Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project. This is session number 28 of Season 7. And today we are going to be discussing episode 12. 12 out of 13. It's the penultimate episode of Season 7. And the tears start flowing freely. Actually, very few named characters die in this episode. This is not an episode of death. This is the episode of betrayals. Well, not that there is no death, of course, but this isn't where the named characters start dropping. That's going to be episode 13.
In episode 13.
Yes, we're going to get an enormous body count in episode 13.
There was a higher body count in an earlier version of the script, but I was told to save it.
Yeah, well, that was like the biggest suspense to me, was like the horns were sounding. I'm like, are the Balrogs coming? Is Fingin going to die before the end of this episode? And then he didn't. And I was guessing he wouldn't, but yeah, that was my biggest suspense. Anyway, I'm Corey Olsen, the Tolkien professor, joined as always by Nick Prosser. I just combined your names at Winter One Place. Yeah, there you go. It's more efficient, you have to admit. Nick Palazzo and Marie Prosser, who deserve to have their names said separately, in fact. Yeah.
That could have been worse.
At least you didn't switch it the other way.
It would have looked shadier if I'd switched it the other way. It's true. It's true. Anyway, Nick Palazzo and Marie Prosser, and joined by Alana Mushin from Australia this evening. Alana, who is the scriptwriter of the script of episode 12, which was really fun. Bringing now that you have followed the Easterlings through their arc here in season 7, through to the well, not the final point, but sort of the turning point. And can I just sort of briefly say it was really fun having Broda be such a significant character in this episode. That was really,
I've
really
got
neat.
plans for Broda.
Yes.
I've got him.
Yeah. No, that was awesome. That was awesome. There are so few of these characters whose names we know. I mean, even in the text, Bor and Ulfang and Uldor are just names, really. Like, we don't actually get to know anything about them personally as characters. But Broda we actually get more of. I mean, because we see him in the Turin story. For those of you who don't remember, let me not make assumptions. If you know the Turinbar story, the leader of the Easterlings, who marries Turin's kinswoman, whom Hurin comes and slays in a fit of rage upon his return to Dor Loman during the dire winter. That's Broda. So he has he gets a prominent role in the post Nirnaeth Arnuidiath story of Dor Loman in particular. So it was really fun seeing his kind of credentials in advance. His initial stuff. Anyway, we will get into the details first. Bunch of really fun moots coming up. We have Tex Moot is our next moot, which is happening in just over a week down in Houston, April 5th. So not this weekend, but next weekend, we'll be having Tex Moot in Houston. And then after that, Willow Moot. Back over to Europe for Willowmoot. I think the Europeans are trying to, there were no European moots between 2019 and 2024. So we went 5 whole years without a single Europe moot. So I think they're making up for lost time. We had UK moot last spring and Stuttmoot in Germany this fall. And now we're going to Belgium for Willowmoot. And then in the fall, Euromoot is happening. And Euromoot, Ilana, they're following in Osmoot's footsteps.
Right.
They want to have an Osmoot style 3-day conference in Europe, and that's going to be starting this fall in Cardiff, Wales, October 3rd through 5th. And of course, we are looking forward to Mythmoot 12 happening in June 19th to 22nd in Leesburg, Virginia, as always. Call for papers closes soon, so if you have an idea for if you have a proposal for a presentation or a paper you would like to give or something you would like to do at Mythmoot, now is the time. Okay. Sorry. Karina on Twitch is just saying, is it just me or is the audio lower than usual? I was just joking with them before we started that, like, I don't know why we have these audio problems. My broadcast software says the audio is great. I don't know why it isn't. But anyway, apologies for that. Okay, but let's get back to... Now, here, I'm not really tempted to linger on the map because we're all on the parts of the map that are not on this map, basically. So we're on the blank...
Ladros up in the top.
Yeah, exactly. We're in the blank northern bits up here today.
Yeah. There are other maps I could have used to help with that, and part of the issue is, of course, the placement of Angband on any map that tries to place Angband.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to introduce a tangent trying to figure out that question.
Yeah,
Unless
exactly.
it's something you want to address.
No.
'Cause if so, I'll give you links to maps.
No, it's not. No, that's okay. Yeah. Though there was actually, since we're talking about map and geographical matters, one question that I had was what's the distance meant to be between the place of the 3 camps at the beginning and the fight at the...
So the 3 camps are in Ladros. So we know where that is on the map, right?
Right.
How far north is Angband from Doriath or from Ladros? Good question. It would have been super convenient if Pilgrim had put that on a map and then had the distances and had it, fit things he said at other times.
Right.
But there are ways, of course, of working it out. It's probably pretty decently far. I think it's supposed to be that you can march from Doriath to Angband in like 450 miles or leagues.
From Dorthonian, you mean?
No, I mean Doriath.
Oh, from Doriath.
Yeah, but I can't remember if that's miles or leagues, and I'd have to actually go look it up. So that's a very unhelpful number.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure, but it is a good ways north.
It was something I puzzled over and was trying to think of how long it was going to take them to get there. And I figured they only had to get to the lip of Van Falglith, really.
Right.
And the rest of it could be in the action of them getting onto the field.
Right.
And yeah, that's also true that the movements in this episode don't get you to the gates of Angband.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like, so on the one hand, I mean, I want to emphasize, this isn't like a, last season of Game of Thrones, kind of armies suddenly transporting thousands of miles across the continent kind of situation. Like, it didn't create a problem like that. But I did find myself, the moment where I was like kind of slightly taken aback was when Maedhros gets the call from Fingon. It's like, come now, and I'm like, crap, Gwyndor's already charged. Like, there's late, like, 'cause I'm like,
well, I mean, the way it's described in the text, there's a big gap of time between Fingon being surrounded and Maedhros showing up.
Right.
That seemed like, I'm like, I'm not sure they'd actually hold out for as long as they're supposed to hold out for.
Because in theory, it would seem it would be like
it was days or
days, not hours. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the travel time.
And I didn't feel like that was plausible. So I wanted it to be a kind of 24-hour thing rather than
right.
3 days or however long.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is not going to take them a whole week to get there.
No.
Even with the longest estimates of the distance. But 24 hours is maybe shortening things a little bit. So we are in a position here where we could be accused of hand waving some of the distance between Ladros and Angband.
Well,
and it's not Alana's fault at all. The whole reason we're in that position is the decision to make the beginning of the Feanorian setting out being Fingon saying, "I need you now," was meant to convey that sense of urgency, and the only thing that would create that urgency is Gwyndor's charge.
Right.
So as soon as you set that as the impetus to go, then we were kind of stuck with that. Well, they need to get there really quickly now.
Right.
But we did allude to additional delays, which is sets up the why Fingers and Gwyndor and all there are sitting there waiting for Maedhros, and he's not come yet.
So the original delays are all something that match. It's from the time he gets the message of the battle has started to the time he arrives, how much time has passed. So we built that in as a way of dealing with the fact that there is supposed to be that delay in the text.
But they're pretty much ready to go. I mean, they're just waiting on the billings at the point. That I hope that came across.
No, that did.
So to mobilize to move wasn't going to take days.
Exactly. No, that's very clear. It was just the travel distance thing. I mean, and I found myself kind of debating. Of course, one way to solve this problem is to have them not be in Ladros, but in an advanced camp, right? So where they know they are not like immediately next door, but because presumably, if it did take 24 hours, even if it did take 24 hours, okay, Noldor could probably, march or ride for 24 straight hours and then fight at the end of it. But humans couldn't, right? I mean, that's a little much to ask. Well, it's not impossible, but it's a little much to ask of humans
it's difficult, yes.
March on foot for 24 hours at fast paced across the distance and then fight a battle at the end of it. So even if it's only 24 hours, which, as you say, Marie, is a fairly low estimate of the distance, you'd still probably want to camp somewhere, right? And so I guess theoretically, one way to solve the problem is just move the whole setting of this episode from Ladros to Enfalgwith and have it be
that's an easy fix.
and just have them be because the time beforehand, we don't know exactly how much time is, but when we jump back to them, so like the initial mobilization, the movement up in advance. And I think everything else still works as far as getting the army ready to go, as far as like prepared to, engage and making sure they know their assignments and everything for what's, meant to happen on the next day and everything. Of course, there would be more like risk of like some kind of contact with the enemy at that kind of an advanced camp. There'd be, I would think, heightened like concern or security.
No, Morgoth knows they're coming. I mean, this is not a secret.
No, it's not that it's secret. But again, it's just like, if it's an advanced camp, you'd be more on guard because orcs could come in at any point. Right. Whereas in Ladros, they're not so worried about.
Yeah, that's probably why we had it in Ladros.
Nick, you're muted.
Oh.
That's why nobody can hear me. They can't be.
No, we were just ignoring you really effectively.
Wow, I really can't get a word in edgewise. Usually I can find some way to force my way in. So they cannot be so close that Angband would feel compelled to engage them in the way that they've engaged Fingon.
Yes.
Nor can they be so close that they could be aware of how intensely how intense the pressure that's being put upon Fingon is.
Yes.
So we'd have to be rather careful with that.
Out of sight.
Right.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And also it also depends on how far away the Fingon's army is set up too.
Yeah.
Because if they don't have to cross the distance to Angband instantaneously.
Right.
Or even, they could be 50 miles from there. In fact, that seems a perfectly reasonable distance
for Fingon to be away from the gates.
Yeah.
So when I said before the gates of Angband, that can be some distance, but just
right. When Fingon,
wide radius.
Right. When Fingon is set up here, the whole idea that we set up in episode 11 is that they're pretty far away. The idea is that Maedhros is supposed to get there first.
Yes.
They're not supposed to be sitting at this location for any length of time. They are,
Right.
but
Right. Yeah. No, that's part of the problem. No, I agree. So when I'm talking about there being, when I'm talking about an advanced camp, I don't mean an advanced camp. I mean like halfway there, maybe 2/3 of the way at most, right? 4 hours of travel still yet to go. Because then that's still like, we got to be there right now. Because
you can move them closer than Ladros and still have them in the hills.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, even just to, I could imagine adding in some references to like, maybe in the early sequences when the Feanorians are talking to each other or something, some references to, I mean, because they'd have scouts out.
Having had moved or something like
right,
that.
or like, the being on guard and on edge, this close to, a sense that this is not,
that's easy.
Their secure camp in Ladros. Because if they were that close, if they're like 4 to 6 hours away, then he gets the call, get here right away, and they set out right away. That I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the 3 days away would be a problem.
It would be, exactly. It really would.
Well,
I mean,
it is a problem because the script doesn't work.
Exactly. So we wouldn't.
Yeah. But that actually, moving the camp is the easiest fix.
Yeah.
To a place that's not on the field.
Yeah.
Right.
Closer to.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So anyway, that was my geography adjacent point. Before we even really begin, I did want to draw attention to the link that's been up on the screen. Go to the forums.signumuniversity.org. The SilmFilm Project forum script, season 7 script discussion, and you will find season 7 episode 12, so you can see the text of this script for yourself. It's a really fun script. I couldn't put it down, so really great work there, Ilana. Let's actually, hey, wait, before we talk about the A plot, is there a B plot? There is a B plot.
Everything else.
Okay, Oldor is the A plot.
Yes, and
the rest of the
elves
armies.
Basically, it's the
Okay.
The armies. Yeah, the Galadriel Boar stuff. All that is technically.
Okay. Right. So I want to start talking about the C plot of this episode, which was my favorite part of the entire episode, which is the gift of the Proto-Mayaris to Bor. Oh my gosh, that was awesome. I loved it. That was a real, I mean, just perfect that Bor should be the recipient of that. Interestingly, the line, like the Lord of the Rings line, I couldn't get out of my head when I was reading that session was the one where they're talking about, where I think it's Aragorn, right? Talking about the Rohirrim and their history, and saying, not of the 3 elf kindred, maybe, but near, like how he's talking about how like the Rohirrim and their ancestors were like Edain adjacent, but not exactly Edain, right? And it just, the way that, so first of all, it's of course necessary that at some point the gift of horses, like the introduction of, a Valinorian strain into horses, which will eventually come down to Eorl the Young, right? Needs to happen. Like that needs to happen. It should happen in the first age. And Bor is perfect, of course, is like, Bor and his people are the ones from whom the Eotheod and eventually the Rohirrim will be descended. So, and of course, like, what other opportunity do we have to do that? One could have imagined some kind of like denouement, right? Where, like, after the battle, like Galadriel, who knows that Bor remained faithful, right, goes and finds Bor afterwards or whatever. But there's going to be too much fallout from the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. And next season, we want to be really focused on the Turin story, not, gallivanting off, on a side quest to give the Mayaris to, to Bor and his people right afterwards. So, anyway, I loved it. I loved that idea. Having Galadriel be the giver was particularly fun, right? Of course, I was thinking about the Unfinished Tales stuff, right, with Galadriel like protecting the journey of Eorl the Young, right, on the way down to the field of Celebrant and stuff, and just sort of seeing it's just, as I've said many times before, the coolest reward of doing this kind of storytelling is when you're able to include something which invests an element of the Lord of the Rings with even more meaning, right? With this like whole new dimension of meaning. And that's really, really fun. And I felt that and so that choice, I had this like really quick series of reactions when Galadriel did. I mean, I was just like, oh, it's the Mayaris. That's awesome. And, but then my second thought was, but why Galadriel? Like, that's really interesting that Galadriel would be the one to do that. But then immediately I was like, oh, no, it's perfect. It's perfect for Galadriel to do this because, again, she's going to be connected later. And, of course, then, like, the irony of, like, the Rohirrim bad-mouthing Galadriel, right, later on, right? It's, yeah, it becomes, like, really richly ironic and everything. So anyhow, it was awesome. I was scanning ahead, Marie, to see if there was an item, if it was mentioned on any of the lists, and I wanted to make sure to talk about it briefly before we get caught up in the big stuff, because that was just a perfect, delightful moment. And the fact that they're too young to fight in the battle, i.e. they'll all survive, it was also a kind of a clever touch. Of course, it does mean that, like, Bor's people have to be able to return to the camp to, like, fetch them, right, and leave.
Some of them will.
Right, yeah. Apparently, some of them will. But anyhow, so... and actually, let me continue with like the inverse discussing. Like, let's discuss the B plot, the other stuff first, and then we'll come to Uldor, and the betrayal, which is obviously sort of the center of the episode. So, I thought this was a really effective usage of the Asanwe Kenta. It's one of the most prominent usages of it that we've done in one of our episodes, I think. I don't mean that it's like that we haven't represented it before, or that we spent more. It's just like this is the first time we've had this kind of a pivotal turning point, really handling the somebody receives a telepathic message from afar and has to immediately act on it, and it's a plot changing moment. That image of Maedhros like freezing mid-stride as he gets slammed with this really emotional outreach from Fingon. The plan is to do voiceover there or just text on the screen? Do you think? So the hard thing is that
I know we had discussed that, by the way, if you have mind-to-mind communication, it's not words.
It's not verbal. Yeah.
This is pre-language. So how do you convey that? And we probably would do voiceover anyway, because how else do you tell the audience what impressions and feelings the person is receiving?
I was trying to keep words to an absolute minimum.
Yes.
And just the image of Gwyndor's charge and the
right.
Like
so having the visual take over the screen would be the way we show how immersive it is to.
Right.
Just Fingon watching this because he hasn't engaged yet. I mean,
Yes.
that's, so it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is a challenge. I mean, it's a very, very difficult piece of adaptation to visual medium. Heck, it's a difficult translation in any medium because, of course, like, howsoever the two characters might be communicating without words, the audience is not going to receive it without words. You know.
So yeah, I mean, I know that one way to do stuff like that is you distort the sound so that like they're still saying the words, but it doesn't sound like they're just speaking them.
Yeah.
So you have this weird effect where it's like, okay, yeah, clearly they're not just having someone speak in their ear, but you're somehow receiving this message. So you could get the impression that there's some kind of translation involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they keep the words to a minimum and do some weird effects with it and have the visuals be bombarding you.
Yes. Because, of course, like the visuals, that is how you can communicate, even to an audience without words, right? Yes.
Because our viewers will have seen Gwendol's charge in the previous episode.
Right.
I know what's going on.
Yeah, and so seeing that, like, from a very different camera angle, I would think, right? We would do it from a more of a first-person camera angle, like from Fingon's point of view, right? Which is presumably not how the camera angle would have been working in the last, during episode 12 or 11 rather. And because it's so to me the trick, that is to say the story, the important thing to maintain in the minds of viewers is that you can't just speak detailed paragraphs through the Osanwe Kenta, right? I mean, it's that's where the telepathic communication becomes a very significant plot obstacle, right? Or a very difficult story challenge. I mean, if you can just go back and forth as if you were, on a live call, then it creates difficulties to let the story unfold in the way that it is, right? I mean, if they're just all like, on comms together, right, at all times, that changes the story. And so helping our viewers not to forget, because we are going to need to create situations where there still is either misunderstanding or incomplete understanding of what is supposed to happen. We would create a situation where viewers would be like, why didn't you just tell him? Like, he can speak telepathically. You should have just told him. So making sure it's clear that that's not possible. This is not how this works. It's not how the telepathy works, especially since people are quite accustomed to like spy shows where people are speaking on comms, in their ear and stuff like that. Like that happens all the time. Anyway, but I did like the interruption with Maedhros, the touch that I liked best about it, he is sending like querying thoughts to Fingon, right? What's happening? And Fingon just keeps sending back, come now, come now. I have but one thing I am communicating to you, and that is come now. And then what I really loved is that Maedhros like reflects that, right? He responds to it, and his brothers are like, what's going on? And he's like, we have to go. And then he just starts repeating like the same thing, with the same urgency. And I thought that was
because he's
really
just been
effective.
emotionally connected to Fingon's urgency.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So he's feeling and, still feeling exactly the same urgency that Fingon had. Actually, it even occurs to me a really brief reference in that moment to like, Fingon must still hold for, several hours. You know, like
Yeah.
let's just hope that Fingon can hold for, you know, the like 4 to 6 hours it's going to take us to travel that distance, you know, in a non-lame way. But yeah, just to prevent anybody from thinking we're trying to imagine they emerge from their tents and step right onto the battlefield there. But anyway, cool. So one of the things that I really liked about the end of this episode was Tolkien has that, as has been the truth so many times in SilmFilm history, where we are taking like one sentence that Tolkien wrote and making trying to make form a whole scene around it, right? Even a whole episode in a sense around it. The sentence in question, the sentence that I'm thinking of here, is the one where he says, and even then it might have, it might have worked had it not been for the treachery of men, right?
Right.
That was the part that I felt was really successful, because in the text, he refers to the appearance of the sons of Feanor. Like, you could see them coming. But the way that we were depicting this, like, they arrive more than the text directly invites us to imagine. And I liked that. And what I liked about it, it felt to me like one of those changes, because again, we don't get any indication that Fingon and Maedhros met on the field. Like, I don't think they got that close to each other. At least we have no reason to believe, based on that. Though again, the details are quite sparse at that point, but we don't have any reason to believe that they actually connected, that they actually met on the field. But so introducing that, having the two armies actually come together like that and fight together, and again, even meet up, is an addition to the text. Like, that's a change that we have made. But I think it struck me as a marvelous example of making a change from the text in order to convey what Tolkien was conveying in that moment. Because it really did. I could feel it. I could feel that surge of hope, right? I could that, like, hey, this might work. Now, of course, I also know as a viewer the betrayal's coming, right? Because I've seen what Uldor and company are up to. And so, of course, there's it turned to like horrible dramatic irony, right? As, when they hear the horns of the horns and the chanting of the army, and they're like, "Oh, goody! Isn't this wonderful? Here it comes!" Right? And that's, of course, was an appropriately sort of horrible moment of dramatic irony. So I like the fact that we knew that. But again, it really to me, it really strongly conveyed the moment of how close victory was, or potentially victory, what possible victory was. Because in the text, like, basically Tolkien gets us kind of close to victory and then tells us to imagine that it might have worked out. Like, had the Feanorians been able to come all the way in, like, and also actually had.
And this is the point. He says that at a point after the dragons are out, and and the Balrogs are everyone's out on the field at that point.
Yes.
And he still says they might have won.
Yes. Okay. Exactly. It's near the very end of the description of the battle.
We only have orcs and trolls and wargs on the battlefield at the moment.
Right.
Yeah, because one of the things that's so fun about, like, the Battle of the Pelennor Fields is how it's like, oh, these guys are winning. Just kidding. These guys are winning. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Like, the changes in the battle are handled very well in the writing of that story. And with a number of tiers, obviously, it's much more condensed. We don't get that shift back and forth and back and forth. We don't get the ebb and flow of the battle at that level. So we were trying to create some of that.
Yeah.
To tell that story of like, look, they're doing really well right now.
Yeah.
And we could do it because we had so many armies to play with. I mean,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
Right.
So like how you put it together.
Bring more, you know.
Yeah. So having them meet, having not all of Morgoth's forces on the field yet, that's a pretty high point. I mean, I don't know if it's high watermark, but basically.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it seemed to me like it seemed to me like a really good example of the kind of adaptation choice that you can make to deviate from the text in order to show on screen, to have viewers really viscerally feel that thing which Tolkien just kind of tells you about and invites you to imagine. Because I think if we showed it exactly like Tolkien describes it, or to the extent that he does, right? That is, the banners of the Feanorians appear on the horizon, it wouldn't, and then that's effective because he tells us what's happening. To show on screen what's happening, Fingon would be like, oh, is that, hey, look, I think it's Maedhros. Oh, wait, he's not coming after, but he's not coming any closer. I wonder what's happening over there, right? Because it wouldn't appear on screen, right? You wouldn't see it in the same way. So, but yeah, and especially the way that this has followed up the work that we've been doing all season long to try to create the situation where viewers could really believe that the union of Maedhros might succeed, right? I think that's really, I think it's really important to be able to kind of demonstrate that success. Not just hint at it, but to really show, yeah, look, like they're doing the thing. And if you can imagine now, with the success they've already had, if now the whole Easterling army sweeps in like it's supposed to, right? Had Ulfang, in fact, still been in charge, then yeah, you can, and you've got the awesome dwarf siege equipment, right? And like the gates of Angband are going down, and like this could happen, right? And you can really see it. I really appreciated that change. It was something I was thinking a lot about as I was reading those last few pages. Those moments are always fun when I'm reading the script and I'm like, ooh, we are deviating from the text here. Or like, we're like kind of contradicting the text here in a small way, but I love it. I think it's exactly the kinds of decision that really need to happen. Cyclops has a question about Curufin's arm. Did Maedhros teach all his brothers to fight with their left hands? Are there like Feanorian clinics on this?
Ambidextrous.
So my theory about that, when I read that, my theory about that was like sort of two things. Elves have a lot of time to practice everything, right? So I mean, this is something that fantasy author Jim Butcher has talked about explicitly in thinking about the consequences of having characters that are immortal. He's like, they say it takes 10,000 hours of practice to completely master something, but if you live for 1,000 years, you could master 100 things, even some totally random things that you spend a lot of time doing for fun that might seem to have no application, right? But anyway, yes. So would they have thought to like train fighting with their left hands? They certainly had time to develop practicing with their offhands. And I will also add, I am no expert, but as an amateur martial artist, it is something that one thinks about when training, to make sure that you don't just do things always the same way, and that you're able to, even, there are times even in some of my own karate exercises where I will deliberately like put my right hand behind my back and practice just defending and striking with my left hand just in case.
Well, the very opening scene has Curufin and Caranthea sparring, practicing. They could be practicing with their left hands.
Yeah. And I would think in particular, Maedhros' brothers, like the Feanorians would all see the utility of practicing with your left hand. Like losing your right is something that can happen, and they would all see that. Not to mention, of course, as you say, Alana, like the prevalence of ambidexterity among the elves and their facility with, but again, it's like the same kind of implication of like the way in which elves can write with their left or their right hands, and have the different way that they write Tengwar left-handed and right-handed, but you can always tell. Anyway, that's it reflects exactly that same kind of thing. Like, these are people with a lot of time on their hands. And so, like, yes, if you had 100 years to practice, you also could learn to write and or fight with either one of your hands. So it's perfectly plausible. It didn't, but I hear the point that it's, yes, yeah. But anyway, yeah, it was of course the sort of the reference to Maedhros was kind of fun. And also I was taking it that was one of the moments where we were sort of acknowledging the reference in the text that the Feanorians received injuries, but none were taken out.
I was allowed to injure a Feanorian in this episode.
Marie gave you permission to injure a Feanorian.
I did. We're going to injure all of them by the end of 13. So we figured we should start that process here. And I, for one, enjoyed reading what you did with the scene with Curufin. I thought that went very nicely.
Yes.
Because
Caranthea had plenty of things going on for him. So
yes.
Yeah, that's fine. And the thing is, it matched the energy of things are going up and hopeful. So even though it's this is a possibly serious injury right at the beginning of the battle for someone who's probably key to the good guy's side.
Right. It's fine.
His attitude towards it was like, not stopping me. So like, it didn't ruin the momentum of but we're going to keep relentlessly going on with this. So I thought it worked very well.
Yeah. No, that was I thought that was fun. Okay. Other like elf specific things. Yeah, let's talk about the cameos. I mean cameos of like Turgon and Hurin, and I mean cause they, we get a little bit of them.
The Western Front, yes.
The Western Front, yeah, who make their sort of cameo appearance. It was Galadriel. Yes, it was Galadriel who notices Turgon, right?
Yeah.
And is like, holy crap, it's Turgon, right? I felt that was really cool. If anything, I thought that was underplayed. I felt like it got taken in stride a little bit more than it might have done. Like, even maybe a brief reference to like that this is like a portentous thing, or in some way, or it could be taken as a portentous thing.
Called it 8 unlooked for or something like that. But I could be up for if you
want. No, I felt I felt that was not overdone. Definitely, like it's not like I felt that it was a problem, but I think that the wonder could be even more. I mean, there was surprise. There was like what I was feeling from Galadriel's response in the script was like pleasant surprise, which I felt was a notch or two below what
it's not even clear to me she knows the name Gondolin.
Right.
I mean, like,
right.
Right. I mean, she'd know Turgon and Turgon's sign, right? His heraldry and so on. And that was about it. That's, like,
right.
I'm not sure she even would know what to make of seeing that on the field,
Yeah.
given he's gone for hundreds of years at this point.
Yes, exactly. But like the strangeness of that, as well as, so one of the things that was interesting about that moment is that Bor is her interlocutor in that moment, right? And Bor's like, he doesn't know, right? He has no context for any of that at all.
He can't even see it.
No, he can't even see. He's like, there's what, you mean that other blur next to the other blur? Like, I don't, okay, I'll take your word for it. Yes, but, and of course, and again, he has zero context for understanding why it's a big deal that, like, her cousin Turgon is down there, right? So I wonder if maybe even some kind of, I was waiting for some sort of acknowledgement by Galadriel of like, when I say portentous, like that she, something in the, like, you know, perhaps, you know, perhaps this is a really good sign that, you know, perhaps this is, you know, this is an unexpected sign of victory. Like, it's, because it's almost miraculous, right? Like, to everybody else, to everybody on the battlefield, it's almost miraculous.
I did feel that was her, like, her response was that.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Wow.
Like this is like, yeah, a positive miracle has, because I mean, like, imagine, for instance, had the Nargothrondrim showed up. That would also have been really awesome. That would have been really exciting from a military standpoint, right? Oh my goodness, our odds of success have increased significantly. That's great. But that wouldn't, but the quality of the reaction.
I mean, she knows, I mean, the fact that the Nargothrondrim and the Doriath people are not showing up is no secret.
Yes. Yes,
you know,
exactly. So it would have been cool, like, if she'd seen them anyway, right? Unexpectedly, she would have been like, wow, great news. How unexpected and delightful and you know,
change your mind. You know?
Right, marvelously increasing our odds. But it wouldn't have that element of wonder that the sudden appearance of Turgon would have. More awe and wonder is what I wanted from, and for her to communicate to Bor. Right. Okay. Even to try to give him, like, the faintest glimpse that, like, something very like a miracle has just happened, and like an elf army has literally, like, appeared as if, like, the, you know, the missing elves have come out of hiding. How did they even know? Like, oh my goodness! Like, this is
okay. That can be done.
Because so I and we don't get much of anything from the Feanorians, but that didn't bother me so much because I would kind of expect them to sort of play it cool. Right? They're not going to go all, like, you know, like goggle-eyed over the gondolin.
Well, that's why I gave it to Galadriel.
Yeah, exactly. No, but yeah.
I don't know. Turgon and his 10,000 gondolindrum are going to get anyone's attention when they show up on a battlefield.
Yes. Mithras would be excited. Yeah.
Mithras is definitely excited for this.
Yeah. No, he would be.
I agree that Galadriel's the one to give the reaction to.
Yeah. Galadriel's the.
But I can get her, have her explain. Like, Bor can be a bit confused and
like what, like,
wonder.
Yeah, he'd be like, oh, like, an unexpected ally. That's great. And she's like, no, you don't get it. Like, this is like, yes, that. And like, this is, what could this mean? You know, because that's got to be a question. Like, it's got to be a question they're asking.
Throughout, I mean, I tried to put, like, you know, like the fireside scene with Maglor.
Yeah.
You know, like, what sort of signs can we read here?
Yes.
Like, death of bull thing obviously is another kind of sign. You know, like,
yes.
What do we read to all these things? So this could be another one.
Yes. Actually, that reminds me. Well, we might as well talk about it now. That's a thing that I was a little bit surprised. I don't think anybody ever said about it being a bad sign. Like, they talked about the practical elements of it. They were like, oh, well, that's a tragedy. The death of Ulfang. I mean, on the eve of battle. That's a tragedy. And also, like, to be totally cold about it, a potential inconvenience, right? As far as leadership of the army is concerned. But I don't think anybody on either side said like this is an ill omen, essentially. Like that seems like a thing somebody would say.
Some of the Easterlings say things like, well, Allfang said this. It's like, yeah, and look what happened to him. Like there's
Right.
there's a little bit of that, of the reason we're going to go in a different direction now is because
Amras says it.
Emra says it? Okay.
Yeah.
Did I forget? Okay, yes. Oh, that's right. Emra said it.
No,
I
Amras
think
says it's not a good sign.
not a good sign. Right. I think I downplayed it because it was just like Amras being Amras, right? Like Mr. Gloomy saying something gloomy. Yeah. No, I think more along the lines, Maria, of what you were just suggesting, like that it's the, obviously there's the desire for justice and vengeance that is activating them. But I mean, you almost, the people, okay, where I would expect to hear it most is among the soldiers before they're told what happened. If they know that their beloved commanding general has died suddenly and unexpectedly the night before the battle, they would be really spooked. And whatever else they're making of it, or whatever causes that, rumors would doubtless be flying everywhere.
So there's lots of rumors going on.
Exactly. Any number of outlandish things.
But what I haven't done is given voice to the rumors.
Mm-hmm.
Like that you can see soldiers huddled and like talking furtively amongst themselves and so on.
Yeah.
And, when the army assembles, they can be, like quite unsure about what's going on. But
Yes.
you're right that there's no scene that kind of gives voice to the everyman soldier's experience of this, even before they are confronted with the Ulfang having been murdered, as opposed to just died, which will it might be too sudden. There's the soldiers that come in right after Ulfang's, Ulder and Ulfast discover the body,
Right.
and that could be a moment, but that would seem a bit too quick, I think, to jump to.
Right. Yeah, it is a little bit calm to stand over the discovered body of your general and be like, I shall take this as a sign. Yeah.
Unnamed dog's body soldiers voicing things that we just kind of pick up the kinds of things that the soldiers are saying, and then that gets quietened down, say when Brodder addresses the that might,
or even when Bor comes in, because Bor can transmit rumors that he's been hearing, right? Because I could imagine Bor coming in saying, look, everybody is saying that like this battle is doomed, that the death of Ulfang is a sign that we shouldn't be doing this. Like basically Bor could bring this up being like, y'all got to get ahead of this. Like this is what the army is saying right now. And that's a big deal. Cause I mean, it's really hard. You don't need a very large modicum of superstition to believe that that's significant, right? To take that as some kind of
you're right.
And what's more, it makes sense as if there's already really strong sentiment, right? That is something that can be turned really easily in the direction that Uldor and Broda are turning it later on, right? Then you utilize, instead of fighting it, you stir it up and utilize it. Like, yes, this was a disastrous sign. Ulfang, basically his alliance with, the message being his alliance with the elves was wrong. Look what it brought him. That's what brought us to this pass, right? That's what brought us to this tragedy. Let us reverse course. Let us heed the sign. Let us heed the warning. Oh, and P.S. like, let us also take vengeance, because it wasn't just an accidental death. It wasn't just a mishap. Anyway, all those things would then kind of point in the same direction to stir them up against that. I think that'd be cool.
I can build some more superstition in there.
Yeah.
I think I was feeling the weight of many, many different viewpoints on the whole whole scenario and trying to keep.
Yeah, no, it's a lot.
I was struggling.
It's a lot. And it's also, I mean, this brings me to one of my sort of biggest overall things is one of the hardest things to manage in this episode is the big shift, right? It's to kill Ulfang and blame it on the elves, thus stirring up resistance to the elves among the men. That feels very logical.
In the one episode.
Yeah, in one episode, right? That feels logical. To take the step of saying, so we're not going to fight after all, would be a small step to take from there. Or let me say that a different way. It is easy to imagine a change in the plans and policy of the army and its new leadership under those circumstances, right? That they would not just go along with their so-called allies when one of their allied leaders just murdered their leader. That makes all kinds of sense. The tricky thing is to take it the one step further, right? Mm-hmm. We're not just going to not go. We're going to turn around and
well, that was my
them.
like at that point I was like, why aren't they just going back to Silmarillion at this point?
Yeah.
This is what Brodder wants to do.
Right.
I mean, that would seem like a logical thing to do. So I felt somebody that needed to be on the table at some point.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that was raised, because it does seem like that, like this, again, it would be one natural reaction in several different ways, both a superstitious reaction and a logical reaction to say, okay, turns out this whole plan was a bad idea. Like this whole alliance was a bad idea. Let's distance ourselves from these people. Yeah.
We need to take counsel from our king above kings and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sidebar. That was a really interesting moment, I felt. A really interesting world-building moment when Uldor and Ulfast come to Maedhros, and there's this disconnect when they're like, yeah, but you're his sons, so... I mean, we're really sorry about your dad, but, like, y'all have the whole chain of command thing worked. Surely you've thought of this possibility, right? You're going into a battle, people die in battle, even generals die in battle, like... So clearly,
even the elves know that.
Even the elves know that, right? So it is like that moment when like the elves were like, "Do we need to lecture you humans on the whole line of succession thing and how you need to prepare for that? Like this feels weird, right? That we're having to be." But anyway, I really like that disconnect because, of course, what they're not it's a cultural thing, right? What they're not getting is that Ulfang was not the hereditary lord of his people, like it is among the elves, and it does not just automatically pass to his sons like they have, so both like the decision within the army of who would take overall command is going to be certainly not going to automatically go to Uldor and Ulfast, who are not even in the leadership structure, which clearly the elves don't get, right? They don't understand that, and they certainly aren't going to get the like, oh, we got to go ask the king above kings and have him appoint a replacement or whatever. I mean, I felt it was a really interesting moment of cultural disconnect, especially the way it was kind of laden with that sort of irony, right? Of the elves being like, no, we've totally we've learned the whole succession thing. Like we get it now, right? Like it took us a little while, but we figured that out, and we thought you humans were really good at this part, right? Like why are you the one surprised by sudden death? Isn't that part of your whole thing, right? I mean, yeah. Anyway, so I thought that was a really fun moment, but also interesting because it helped to explain why the machinations of Uldor and the whole was so opaque to them, like why they never even suspected that there would be a problem. So I thought that was good. But anyway, going back, end sidebar. Going back now to the main question of their shifting. There were two motivations that the Easterlings as a whole were given in the script for not just going home, but going into the battle and turning against the elves. One was outrage and the desire for justice, right? And the other was greed, essentially, right? The desire for lands. It's the second one that I found hardest.
That's Uldor's motivation.
It's Uldor's motive, and that's exactly why it was hard.
I'm not convinced it's anybody else's motivation.
Right.
In fact, it's not Brodder's motivation, which is going to be the ironic thing when he's given Dorloman
when he takes over. Yeah.
That's what I hope everyone will agree will be the trajectory. So Brodder is going to be this kind of overlord of something he never wanted in the first place.
Right.
He didn't even want. He wanted to go back. You know.
Yeah.
That was his thing, and I did feel like, you know, Uldor's really the only one who's voicing this as a motivation.
Right.
But it's all that Sauron needed.
Right.
And the idea is that Uldor can only partially admit to himself what his motivations are. He's obviously very frustrated with his father before any of this happens.
Yes.
And, you know, you can't say, my dad is so annoying, I think I should just go kill him, unless your dad has actually done something very wrong. Like,
right.
So he's justifying to himself his actions by saying, look, the king sent us here for a reason, and my father didn't follow through with that reason, and that's a problem.
Right.
Everyone else was like, well, obviously you fight the battle first, and then you divvy up the lands and the spoils. Like, we all get that. We're a professional army.
Right.
So no one else was worried that Ulfang wasn't doing that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uldor has to keep saying it because that's his excuse for his own actions. So it's not necessarily...
I guess Ulfast is also somewhat aligned with that, but he doesn't have the same kind of anxiety. I mean, there's an anxiety about it, I feel, with Uldor.
Yeah.
You know, he's trying too hard to you know, hold on to this kind of aspiration to, this is the way I can be a lord and really show what kind of a leader I am, is to, you know, have the lordship of East Valerian or something, you know, like
it fits. So yeah, exactly. I felt that it clearly fit with Uldor's character. I like, and I felt like I could get into the reasons behind that. That is, it seemed to me to fit really well with the general, like, you know, inferiority thing, that understandable inferiority thing that Uldor has, and his frustration with his father's impatience and his father's harshness with him all the time. That basically Uldor is progressively giving up on pleasing his father and achieving, well, anything, right, in the normal course of events, right? Like, he's not only is being the son of the great general not a shortcut to promotion and you know, wealth and power and prestige, it has proven it's closed the door to it as far as he can see.
And Ulfast is, you know, he's a member of the same family, and Ulfang's tough on him too, but Ulfast is like, yeah, I can see what he's doing, you know, doesn't bother me. Where it really bothers Uldor.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so it was easy for me to imagine how this new prospect of new lands, which are essentially, like, yes, technically, you know, vassal kingdoms to the king above kings, but they're their own separate thing, right? The ability to kind of, the prospect that Uldor has, not just of wealth or power, but of, like, creating something new, of hitting the reset button. Like, I don't have to just move up the chain in the way that my dad is refusing to let me move up the chain, but I have a chance to strike out on my own and receive, you know, lands of my own and establish a new kind of paradigm. I mean, just that seemed to me to fit the kind of desperation that he was showing, and the reason why, as you say, he's the only one obsessing about this. Like, why, Uldor, why are you the only one who's thinking about what happens after? Like, first let's defeat the bad guy and then we can work it out. Because even his argument that, like, Caranthir isn't going to share the lands in East Beleriand, like, well, but there's a lot of Beleriand, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's land as far as the eye can see here, right? So, like, let's work that out.
And he's
separately.
also desperately trying to pin the murder on Caranthir as
yes,
well.
of course, yeah, at
he
the
has
same
to
time.
say that.
Yeah, exactly. So as I say, I feel fine with Uldor's own fixation on the land. And of course it's a nice mechanism for because we know that's the thing that Tolkien mentions as to what motivated the Easterlings. So it's a good way to get that piece in there, right? Anyway, so I liked all that. The challenge that I saw, it's not that anything in it doesn't work, but we've got Uldor who's motivated by the land, and Uldor is making the argument to Broda and the other captains that they should be motivated by the land. And he even implies, doesn't say it, but even implies, well, if we're less than 100% sure that the elves are going to give us land, maybe the other side will, right? Which seemed to me like a pretty wild leap of speculation on his part, right? That it, you know...
Sauron has put that planted that.
Right, yeah. Though, like... Nothing even in the same postal code as a promise was made about that, right? I mean, like...
Yeah, but that's not what Uldor's going to hear.
Right, yeah, exactly. So anyway, so Uldor, but basically, again, the point is Uldor is convinced that's not what motivates the army, the captains or the army, to change. But Uldor does use that argument. And so therefore it creates, potentially, I can imagine viewers feeling like they were being asked to believe that Uldor's arguments were persuasive. If you see what I mean, right? Like, we know that that's not why they did it. Like, but basically what happens is Uldor clearly has this motivation. Uldor makes that argument. And then the next thing we see is them going along with what Uldor said. Right.
Right. So the question is, what did the army find convincing? And the answer is meant to be the revenge.
Right. And I think
that they won't get justice for Ulfang unless they take it themselves.
That comes across real clearly in the big rally scene at the end.
Right. Where they're all chanting Ulfang.
Yeah. No, I mean, when they're up on the podium and giving like that, it was clear what was motivating the soldiers themselves.
Right. Yeah.
And because no reference was made to it there. But again, that's where I wonder.
That's where I was trying to give like Lorgan voices. Look, I mean, you know, Ulfast wants vengeance.
Yeah.
And, you know, kind of, and then we've got Lorgan who's like, well, I never trusted the elves anyway, really.
Right. Like,
I was, you know, I'm loyal to Ulfang, but, you know, like, this just seals the deal for me.
Right.
Broda's not against vengeance. He's just like, let's go home and work it out and then come back, you know, kind of, you know, we need to. And a couple of other unnamed captains kind of on either side, so that I wanted it to be clear that if it was a choice between staying and wreaking vengeance now or going back to Sidveridon, that Broda was going to be in the minority.
Right.
So he goes along with the consensus of that meeting that we don't see on screen. So that was my thinking about that. Are you suggesting we need to kind of make the vengeance sort of side of it stick a bit more in that scene?
No, I think, let's see, to be the precise issue that I was having was, I think we need to do more to make sure that the viewers are clear that we're not asking them to believe that the greed for lands and the belief that Morgoth was going to give them to them was the motivating, like, was what was fueling them. I think the thing that tripped me up was there was that when Uldor is first talking to the captains about it, he has the last word with that, basically.
Yeah, true.
Like the
true.
scene ends with his allusion to the fact that maybe Morgoth
So
will come across.
he could say, I've worked out a way to get vengeance.
Right.
So, I mean, I could make it more about that. I mean, I quite like the idea of him saying it was actually Ulfast's idea.
Right.
Because he's
Yes.
deflecting.
Yeah.
you know.
The way that he deflects is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Either.
So I wouldn't want to lose that, but.
So either he, but at the same time, like, I didn't object to his raising it because, I mean, again, that's like
his thing.
It's his thing, and it's his thing, and it's the thing in the text, right?
Are you hoping
maybe
for
somebody-
another voice to speak
Yes,
after him?
Someone should speak up and say the priority has to be justice at this point.
Yeah.
Or even, I mean, like, basically, if it's clear, because yes, I feel like the story of the reversal, of the shift, of the betrayal of the Easterlings, if any of the viewers feel that we are trying to convey that they were promised lands by Morgoth and that's what seduced them to the dark side, then it's weak, right? Then it's a weak story.
Yeah.
And of course, we have presumptive reason to believe that people will not only be thinking that, but expecting it, because that's what's said in the text, right? So the more people know Tolkien, the more they'll be expecting that to be the motivation. And it doesn't feel convincing. Like, it doesn't feel like Uldor even convinces the rest of the captains, much less the whole army. And indeed, he doesn't, right? But if people are like, I'm supposed to, it would push people to the point where they're like, oh, I have to suspend disbelief now and believe that they've all, like, okay, so I guess the promise of lands by Morgoth is it's happened, and now they all suddenly believe. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it could introduce that kind of thing. It's not a change in anything that I'm suggesting. It's only just to make it more clear that that's not what we're asking them.
Well, that's
to
why I was
expect.
trying to be very careful in the scene with Sauron that
Yes.
there were no promises made at all. Like,
Right.
You know, there wasn't even a suggestion that Sauron was offering anything.
Well,
you know.
Sauron's very good at doing what he does, though.
Yes.
So he comes across in that scene as getting Uldor's headspace exactly where he wants it to be.
Yeah.
And Uldor doesn't even know. Like, Uldor just gets totally spun around and doesn't even know what happened.
Can I say Sauron's intervention was really surprisingly low key? I really liked that. I mean, it was, you know, it was a really skillfully done temptation without being like, I'm going to tempt you now. Like, I'm going to make you an offer of fabulous riches and whatever else. Like, it's just, no, like, I'm just going to come to you at a vulnerable moment and poke you in exactly the right place and then just walk away. Right. And that was so cool. That was really
I will
understanding.
say that I think that the strength of that point may have something to do with the fact that we probably spent about half of the script discussion discussing that exact point and trying to get it right.
Yeah.
Because the balance of having it look like Sauron didn't do anything that caused the events to happen, so he couldn't actually take credit for it,
right,
versus have such a hand in it that it looks like Uldor has no agency, was quite tense.
Right. Or to have to resist having some kind of cheesy, like, I shall give you this reward if only you do this unspeakable thing.
For sure.
In exchange.
Yeah. And I think that was pretty far beyond what any of us were thinking.
Yeah.
It also allowed us an opportunity to give voice to the strength of Morgoth's armies that, you know, just
right.
Like, you know, when Sauron says you haven't even seen 100th of it yet,
yeah,
he's not wrong.
Exactly.
That's the thing. Sauron is just warning him as a friend.
Exactly.
That they're about to make a terrible choice.
Totally true in every
they're
way.
not, so
And that's the thing, is he's not lying.
No.
Like, these guys are all about to be dead.
The other thing that I loved about how understated it was is that you can see why it didn't make it into the Silmarillion. Because he didn't do anything.
Also, who was going to tell us that it happened?
Yeah.
Uldor's dead.
Uldor's dead. There was only one witness and he's dead. And no evidence is left behind. Like, nobody could tell. There wasn't a sudden personality shift. There wasn't no. It was just
the elves certainly aren't going to be like, yeah, so they turned on us because they thought we killed their leader for some reason. Like, they're not going to go into the motivations behind that.
Yeah.
So,
and instead, it's just going to fuel the perfectly understandable conclusion that men obviously can't be trusted, as comes across so clearly in that sentence in the Silmarillion, right? If not for the treachery of men, right? If not for the fact that men are so unreliable, like this would, yeah. I mean, that's like the understandable, elf bias and frustration of that moment peeks through, right, in the text.
And that's why all of the talk of treachery in this episode is the treachery of elves.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're getting the other side here, right? Yes.
I mean, it's a little manufactured. I mean, poor Caranthir.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Caranthir walks into his own problems.
Oh yeah. No.
Yeah.
Caranthir is the and it's actually, that was another thing that I really kind of liked about the whole situation, is that, again, this is not like some strange kind of it's not hard to convince people that Caranthir is so much of a jerk that he would do this. Like, it's totally believable by everybody, including the viewers.
And another thing that was very difficult to manage was the murder itself, like getting him to get away with it.
Right.
Uldor, I mean.
Yeah.
Getting
Uldor, and
Uldor
also implicate Caranthir, and like all of that had to
while giving a plausible, right, exactly. Because if we didn't implicate the elves in any way, it makes Uldor's case much weaker.
Way weaker. Yeah.
And so it had we had to be able to point the finger at them.
If Ulfang is just killed by person or persons unknown, there's nothing but omen now at that point.
Right. Yeah. Right. It doesn't look good, and maybe we don't march into battle at all.
Yeah.
But we definitely don't fall on our heretofore allies.
Right. Our allies of 5 minutes ago. Yeah. Exactly. No, that was really, that felt like a necessity, not necessarily for Uldor personally, but for the army as a whole. And of course is the perfect the perfect payoff of what we have built up about Ulfang's relationship with the army, right? The one thing that will absolutely motivate the army is believing that the elves murdered their beloved general. Like, that will do it. They'll be ready. They'll be ready to take up arms immediately against the people they were just considering their allies 5 minutes ago. Especially then when you add in the fact that they've been really uncomfortable anyway. And I mean, in this way that humans are always uncomfortable when they come into contact with the elves the first time, and probably also fueled by a certain amount of feeling of inadequacy and things like that, when you're fighting alongside the Noldor, right? Like, I mean, there are lots of
comment about the eyes, I don't like their eyes. Like, that was really, and because of course the Calquendi.
Yeah, exactly. It's freaky, right? I mean, like, it's like supposed to be freaky good, but like it's weird.
It's Gary Mitchell from the second Star Trek pilot that wasn't.
I don't think I know that one.
Where No Man has gone before, I think it's called. Someone where they're still in the old uniforms with the turtlenecks, and Spock can still smile. So it's like listed as episode 2 of the original series.
Oh, okay.
And Kirk's in command, but his first officer is Gary Mitchell, who's like his best friend, and he somehow develops like god powers. It's one of the episodes in Star Trek where there's a an all-powerful being that's defeated by facts and logic.
Yes.
Right.
As so often happens in Star Trek.
Right. That's how you do that.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Or you wait for their mom and dad to show up.
That's the other method. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But his eyes have this like really freaky glow about them, and I'm sure that the Noldor don't look quite that alien,
but if you actually imagine physically glowing eyes under almost any circumstances, that's never gonna not be unsettling. I mean, that's
and like, if you have never experienced elves before at all, and now you have to have fairly close contact with them in the context of preparing for battle and going into battle with them, like, yeah, you're gonna have misgivings in a way that you can't just be like, well, yes, elves are over there doing their thing, but that's no concern of mine. Like, you have to actually buy into this in this context.
Yeah. So no, I thought that all the rationale of the army felt right. That felt good. That the way that Caranthir is the perfect patsy for this. I mean,
yeah, that was
totally
we didn't spend
perfect.
a lot of time discussing.
No. No, that's that works really well. And that's one of the other things that's really sort of fun about this is Caranthir's is not guilty, but he's also not innocent. Like, this is partly his problem, right? Now, had Maglor been the one going to Ulfang's tent that night, right, and the two of them had a perfectly jovial and pleasant conversation, and then Maglor waltzed out, and then Uldor does the body discovery thing, it still could have worked, I think, right? Especially for the men. Again, because I think that many of them would have been quick.
Oh, they don't care whether it's Caranthir or Maglor.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But the captains all have direct experience they've all seen Caranthir act.
Yes.
And it's really, really easy to believe. The fact that nobody asks the fact that there's no investigation at all, right?
Why? Like, it's clear.
It's clear. Yeah, it's clear.
He was in the tent.
I think that
it means motive opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, and I think because those things were really clearly there was perhaps one of the reasons why I was not thinking we need to insert more sort of superstition into this, because there was just evidence.
Right.
That,
right. Yeah.
So I mean, part of it is that we needed to get the weapon that was going to be into the scene without like it being too hokey.
I think I see the link, or the role that I would think that superstition would play, that the mere death under strange circumstances of Ulfang on the night before the battle would itself be enough for superstitious reasons that the army is going to be like, we're not going anywhere. We're not doing anything. Right. And then the revelation of the treachery and the murder is enough to get them from that. So, because they're the two steps they have to take. Right. And instead of just jumping all the way, from A to C, right, they go through B, like they're already in B. Like nobody has to say anything befis in B. Like that army's not moving. Unless it would take something huge, which is again, this is the part that's beyond the comprehension of Maedhros. He doesn't, like, why would the army not march? Just because, I mean, again, it's sad that Ulfang died, but seriously, like, he cannot comprehend why this would lead to them just going off this whole expedition.
Yes, he doesn't see it. But at the same time, if Maedhros dropped dead, would this battle happen? And the answer to that is pretty obviously no.
No, but but that's different. That's different because Ulfang isn't the one who organized brought everything together and did the whole thing.
But he just had the situation with Oswald where Azaghal brought his guys out and then died in battle, and then the dwarves who were marching with Azaghal all went home and like, we're done with the battle now.
Yeah.
The fact that they got to keep the siege engine dwarves was, like a bonus.
Mm.
So it's not like he has no concept of this, but I agree he does not understand the level to which this has crippled all things army.
Do you know, I did not explicitly think about those two things together. There was the one reference to like how Maedhros's like diplomatic coup of keeping the siege engine dwarves despite Azaghal's death. But the parallel between Azaghal dying and the army going home and Ulfang dying and the army going home, that never crossed my mind as I was reading it, which is really interesting.
I mean, it probably crossed Maedhros's mind, though, is the thing.
Well, you'd think, yeah, you'd think, but
that's all I'm pointing out.
Right.
But these aren't dwarves for a
They're
start.
not. And
the relationship between Ulfang's army and the way the elf army and Ulfang's army have worked together over months now, presumably.
Right. But I wonder if that should be reflected more in the conversation between Maedhros and Uldor and Ulfast, though. Because in that conversation, he seems like he doesn't seem to entertain the idea that the army is not going to march. Like, he seems confused when they're like, well, we have to sort things out. And again, he's like, people, chain of command, like, you've got this, right? Like,
I think that's his frustration of they're already late. They're already behind schedule.
Right.
He really needs them to just figure it out and keep going. But
I mean, that's time imperative is greater here in that sense.
Yeah. So his own needs are coloring how he approaches that conversation clearly. Like his own, okay, but like, can you just sort it out and let's get going?
Right.
And that doesn't mean he doesn't understand that they need a minute. He doesn't want to give them a minute.
Right. Yeah. I wonder.
But he does. Yeah. I mean,
he does. Give him a day. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if. Well, I mean, perhaps this is something that would be like, could be accomplished in like the director's instructor to the actors in this scene, basically, to make it clearer that Maedhros is like frustrated in being patient rather than not, because the way it came across, it might just have been my like a tone that I was adding to my own reading, was that he was just like, I don't see the problem. Like, or rather, like, again, I know it's not that he was downplaying that it was a big deal. Like, it's a big deal. It's a tragedy. I liked him a lot. He's your father. I understand all these things. This is a big deal. But like, we have this need and you have a chain of command and we can still go, right? Like, we're still, everything is fine. He did not seem, it felt to me like he wasn't approaching it as he, in the immediate aftermath of the dwarf situation, right? As you say, Marie, the parallel certainly would have occurred to him, right? Like, oh man, we can't have another army backing out at us at the last minute because their leader died, right?
Yeah, I think part of the difference is that Azaghal was very much like, so you know how the dwarves have never marched with you guys before. I'm going to like make an exception for that. So it was the dwarves' hesitancy was built in from the very beginning of that relationship. So as soon as Azaghal died and the rest of the dwarves were like, we're out of here, Matt was like, yeah, okay, that's what I expected, honestly.
Yeah.
Whereas with Ulfang, there'd been this ongoing, they're training together. Yeah, they've been training together. There's been promises and guarantees all along. This is the eve of battle. Like, of course you guys are going to keep going. Like, you don't need your leader for that, do you?
I think he doesn't occur to him is that there'd be any question of the existential threat facing them if they don't march.
Yeah.
And Ulfang got that, and some of his leaders get that.
Yes.
But I think that's gone, like, it doesn't occur to Maedhros that the entire population of these humans hasn't imbibed the existential threat, and they haven't.
Yeah.
You know?
And he doesn't understand that the elves are being accused of murdering Alfang. Like that part he's in the dark on.
Right. Yes.
And that's gonna make him not understand the situation.
And that's why none of them are going to see the actual treachery coming.
Yeah, because it's only Uldor is only ever the person who knows what actually happened.
Yes. Yes.
Boar knows that something's up, though. So
Yeah.
Boar sees this coming. When Boar sees the banners, he's like, what's
Yeah,
this?
because I always expecting them not to march.
Right.
So when they show up, he's like, that's not what I thought was going to happen. So what's going on?
Right.
Like,
right.
But he knows the elves are being accused of. Like
Yes.
He knows about that accusation, and Uldor is, not doing a great job of hiding the fact that he's a murderer, and so he does keep saying things that he maybe shouldn't be saying. And one of them was to try to convince Boar that Alfang was talking to the elves about the lands and all that. And Boar's like, that doesn't sound like Alfang at all.
yes, I like that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that's clearly not.
Though
what
I
happened.
also liked Uldor's line where he was like, I spoke with my father about this, which is totally true. Like, not a lie. Not a lie.
And its thing is like, you maybe shouldn't admit to the conversation you had right before you killed the guy. But
Yeah.
so yeah, Uldor's giving bits and pieces away, and Boar has enough to know that something fishy is here.
Boar understands the existential threat, so he's like, there is no time to investigate.
Right. So yeah, he makes his decision of, we're just going to go to war now. We'll figure it out later. But yeah, the elves don't see it coming because they don't understand what the army thinks.
Right.
And like what they're,
So, let me go back to the scene of crime for a minute. One of the things that I found a little bit funny, ironic about the dagger was that, like, he's found with this elvish dagger sticking in his back, which on the one hand looks like, this clearest piece of evidence you could ask for, right? Except the camp is now awash with elven daggers. They're all over the place. Everybody's got one. So like yesterday it would have been smoking gun evidence.
Yeah.
Today it could have been anybody.
It
Right?
had to be distinctively
Caranthir's dagger. Yeah.
That's why it couldn't just be any well, of course, I love the gift of the elven daggers because it put me in mind of the daggers that are given to to Merry and Pippin.
Yes.
But
no, I did think of that, but that's why we also have Caranthir being the last person to be seen with Alfang.
yes.
There's
There's other circumstantial evidence for sure.
The people who are the captains, the people who are close in will know that that's Caranthir's personal dagger that they've seen.
Yeah.
The rest of like when Uldor shows the dagger, like people aren't gonna know.
It's also probably significantly more blinged out than the ones that they're
It's
given.
Caranthir. It's got to be max bling, right?
Right? Like it's the same style for sure, but it's definitely nicer than the ones that the Noldor just gave away.
Way more
which,
gems embedded on it. Yeah.
Wouldn't you know, the ones they have for themselves are way nicer than the ones they give to us peons.
Especially Caranthir. Yeah.
For
Mr.
sure.
Dragonhorde himself.
Yes.
I didn't feel that it was a plot weakness. It was just kind of funny. Like I'm like, yeah, there's like all these elven daggers now. It made me like think for a moment, like,
Boar makes the point. It's like, there's lots of these daggers.
right. And yet real doubt, there's no real doubt about that. Like it's not like there isn't anybody in the camp, including Boar, who is like, I think the evidence is woefully insufficient. Like, I find Caranthir not guilty of the accusation. Like, Bor is not, he's going to continue on. He doesn't believe that even if Caranthir is in fact guilty, he doesn't feel like it's any reason to back down from the elves or from fighting Morgoth. Like, Bor, in large part because of his relationship with Galadriel, it seems like, gets the existential threat much better than the other humans do, and also has good reason to believe through his relationship with Galadriel that, like, even if Caranthir is a jerk, which is empirically demonstrable, right? And even was guilty of murder, which is at least plausible, if not certain. Again, that doesn't mean anyone who has met more than one elf knows that Caranthir is not in fact typical of how all elves are, and not reason to conclude that everything is. Anyway, so I think that all makes. I get Bor's perspective seemed to me convincing. And again, it isn't, I get, no one is like, there's no like, Caranthir doesn't have a clever defense attorney, right? Who is using the multiple elf, like, how sure can you be that this dagger was Caranthir's and not one of these others? Anyway, it struck me as a little bit funny in the moment because I was imagining exactly that. I was like, I suddenly had this little vision of like a court scene in which Caranthir gets off because the jury is convinced that you can't tell which.
Henry Fonda shows up in the jury chamber and drives the exact same dagger into the table.
Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of that's what I mean when I said I found it a little bit funny.
Yeah, we spent
That movie
some
is so good.
time discussing what level of obviousness it would have and what involvement Sauron had in the actual murder. Like, because we definitely portrayed him as setting Aldor on this path and being like, go talk to your dad now, knowing that was at boiling point and presumably would happen. But we didn't go so far as having Sauron be like, here's this elvish dagger. Go kill your dad.
That was my idea.
Yeah.
Originally. But
that he'd give him a conspicuous murder weapon. Yeah.
That Sauron would give him the dagger, not to kill his father with, but just in case. No.
Right. Yep. No, So
we had discussions about where the daggers were, where they were coming from, who had daggers.
I feel that, Uldor's a fairly weak character in lots of ways. So I felt like the murder itself needed to be impulsive.
Yes. I like that.
And that he was immediately like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, that freaked him out. It was not a cold-blooded murder in that sense.
Yes. The lack, like, Uldor both committing a murder of his father and yet not having some kind of like, I am a villain and committing to doing evil now switch, I liked a lot. I thought that felt really plausible. And the way in which, and it seemed to me totally believable in the sense that we've seen that pressure building, as Ulfang smacked him down again and again and again. The idea that like, that kicked dog was going to turn finally at some point that's why I was nervous when Ulfang was standing between Uldor and the cliff, when they were coming over, like it was too soon. It could have happened, right?
And that's what we've tried to show, is that this could have happened at any point.
Yes.
Because this has been an ongoing antagonism.
But I think Uldor was there when the king above kings, when Ibang says, I'm going to grant fiefdoms to your sons. And that was a way, like, from Ibang's perspective, that was like, I'm pushing the Ulfang family out over the mountain.
Yes, exactly.
So he doesn't know or care about Uldor's motivations or aspirations. Yes. Uldor hears this and goes, this is my chance. and he becomes obsessed with that, as this is my chance, and he's the only one who's obsessed with that aspect of it. But he really believes that he's doing this for his king.
Yes.
I think he really
until
believes.
this moment, he probably thinks he's doing it for his family too, and his dad.
Yeah. Oh well, yeah. I mean, in the last, that was the clifftop conversation.
Right.
Yes. And so when Ulfang says, this is just for your glory and not for, he's not exactly right there. Actually, I think Uldor actually believes he's doing it for a bigger purpose, to serve his king and country and all of that. But he is also doing it for himself. So
he is. I mean, and he wants to prove himself. He wants an opportunity, which he believes his father is never going to give him. And but yeah, he's not just in rivalry with his father. He's not just rebelling against his father. I agree. I felt that was, I liked the impulse. I was surprised by the impulsiveness of the murder. I was surprised in the sense that, like, he stabs him in the back, and I was like, "Wait, what? That was the murder? Like that? Like, right? That in the
Well, Nick made me change it. It was more. There was more going on in that scene, and Nick sensibly said that, like, if there was too much of a scuffle, people would hear.
Right.
And
I watch too many murder things with my wife.
Yes.
I've definitely not on my own inordinately thought a lot about murder. Just want to clarify that.
I am right there with you. I thought far more about murderers and serial killers than you would think would be wholesome under normal circumstances. Yes.
Yeah. But, people get caught doing these sorts of things because they leave a bunch of evidence behind, and and the neighbor sees them, and the old lady across the street with the glasses thinks she sees them through the window, and
nobody suspects Uldor.
Yeah.
Right.
But Bor suspects something's up, but he's not necessarily. He's not suspecting Uldor, did it?
There certainly can't be anywhere near enough evidence that he's a real suspect.
Yeah.
Right. There could be people who are like thinking that his meteoric rise is kind of sudden and unpredicted, and isn't it weird that he wants to do the exact opposite of what Dad wanted to do?
Well, that's why I had Brodder being
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's why it wasn't. I didn't put Ulfang at the leadership of the army, because there was no way.
Yeah, exactly. For him just to step in and everybody be like, "Oh yeah, no, we're going to give exactly the same loyalty to Uldor that we gave to his dad."
If Brodder's actually a very strong second in command, and so also trusted by the army, then Brodder saying, "Let's hear from one of the sons," it's like appropriate. Yes. But it's and Brodder kind of elevating Uldor to say, he's being getting justice and revenge for his father and so on, so he can be the one to sound off the let's charge.
Yeah,
that's Brodder doing delegation rather than Uldor sign the
exactly.
The
Uldor looked like he was an instrument being used in a political stunt rather than being the one who was behind the things.
That's right. Yeah. And and I don't think Uldor. I mean, Uldor knows he's not actually trying to lead the army. He just himself. That doesn't matter to him.
Yeah. And if Uldor is doing things that look a little weird or a little guilty, which he is, there's not a lot of time to be looking into all of this, and people will give you some leeway of like, hey, his dad just died / got murdered. He probably is upset about that. Like, he might be a little off right now. And the fact that it's like, well, he's off because he feels really guilty about it. It's like, well, okay, we didn't get that far. But I think that it's not that people don't notice the things he's doing that are off. They're just like, well, given the circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. So the last kind of murder mystery angle to it, there was only one element of it, is that I kind of, once I got over my surprise at the like comparatively unheralded moment, right, which was like the huge turning moment happening so spontaneously and at the tail end of another scene, like the way, and that was the thing, right, because the confrontation between Ulfang and Caranthir felt like climactic, right?
Yes.
And then we're just like literally
But there's more.
tidying up after that, when all of a sudden
Yes.
suddenly the huge event actually happens
Yeah.
and sneaks up on you. And again, in the end, I kind of liked it. I was surprised. I was taken aback at first, but I kind of liked it the more I thought about it.
It was supposed to come in a place where it would catch even a relatively canny audience member off guard.
Mhm.
Like the idea being, not that it surprises anybody that it happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That should not
No.
be.
Yeah.
Oldor's
Oldor's been ready to
you're
blow
like,
for some time.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh!
Right. He actually did it. Like it actually
I didn't know
happened.
that was going to happen
Right.
there.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that was definitely the experience. Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean,
You are expecting a confrontation because he's just gone from Sauron.
Right.
So
Right.
Caranthir and Ulfang is sort of in between Sauron sending him on his way.
Yeah.
And Uldor. So we
And
know what he's been primed for.
Yes.
And you also, like, you don't see this in the script necessarily, but like when this is filmed, like there's gonna be a shot of him looking at the dagger. There's gonna be a shot of him picking up the dagger.
Yeah.
And so like there's gonna be at least a
Yank
few
it out of the
seconds.
table.
Right. Yeah. There's gonna be at least a couple of seconds lead up to kind of like prepare you for what's about to happen. Right.
And Ulfang's complete confidence in turning his back on his son is totally in character.
Yeah.
Right.
Why would he?
Right.
Even
Both because
for a
he's supremely confident and does not respect Uldor enough even to fear him at all. But also because he's never really fully appreciated the impact that his poor parenting has had on his son. Like he doesn't get it. Anyway, so yeah, no, that felt totally in character. But okay, now here's my murder mystery thing, and I'm not saying we have to make a bigger deal of it in the script. I just need to know the tent, like his egress. How was there no evidence? Like, how could nobody tell that somebody had left out the back of the tent?
Depends on how the tent is attached to the ground, which we can make decisions about how that works.
I think he wiggled out somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's like, obviously modern tents have the floor.
No, I
sewn to the
wasn't
wall.
assuming that. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, no,
okay.
I wasn't assuming that.
No, I mean, there'd be quite heavy canvas or whatever material it's constructed from. But I mean, I like.
But wouldn't there be some sort of disturbance? Like, wouldn't you be able to see the ground, possibly, or if not the ground,
doing like some
We're investigating it, yeah.
forensic
It's dark.
examination. So the way that I've actually slept in large canvas tents that are meant to emulate pre-industrial design, because I used to do Revolutionary War reenactments.
Yeah, yeah.
And so typically in those situations, there are going to be flaps of canvas that are tied together with like canvas lines, ropes, whatever you want to call them. And as long as those are done up on the outside, and you can get to them from the inside, like it's not that difficult a thing to manage. You could slip out without.
If they were looking for it, they might have found something.
Right.
But it's dark, and Ulfast and Uldor have come into the tent, and with the story of like Caranthir is established as the last person to have seen Ulfang alive.
Yeah.
And it's total. And they heard a scuffle, and
So
Yeah.
I can imagine if they'd done a forensic kind of investigation
Yeah.
of the tent, they would have found something.
Right.
I think the thing that the moment where it troubled me was in the stage directions where it said they cleaned the tent, and I'm like, well, see, now there you go. Like somebody would
Yeah, I see. No, I just meant they've removed the body.
they removed the body.
I mean, that's kind of what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they're going to take this tent down, and somebody's going to be like, "Huh, I don't remember untying these laces."
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like if it's if it's
unless
hanging
they were
open or if it was cut or something like that's going to be up. I mean,
Well,
you'd notice that. You know,
Well,
like
you
look,
can-
there's an entrance to the back entrance
Right.
flapping in the wind, and we can't. No,
Yeah.
we can't. You know.
No,
Yeah.
I was imagining something a bit more squeezing through a hole kind
Yeah.
of.
And the thing is, okay, let's say there is some evidence left behind. They're not looking for it. And
Right.
this is not a scene that someone's like, let's rope it off and have someone come in and investigate, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
like
This is-
nobody's
this is
paying
one-
attention to.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a scene where it wasn't declared okay, obviously they know it's a murder, but if you have a
Right.
suspicious death, but you call the ambulance to come and revive somebody, and it's not rolled as a suspicious situation, and people have all walked through the house and taken things in and out, and no one secured the scene because it wasn't
Yeah.
like being viewed as a potential homicide or whatever. Like those situations after the fact, they're like, yeah, we maybe could have done evidence or
Right.
something if we actually like taken pictures. You know? But you know, there's situations where you don't really have a controlled scene and lots of people move through it. By the time you get to the point where the captains are meeting in that tent and having food and drink and the body's been removed, like there have been so many people in and out of there
Right.
that even if somebody was like, hey, that's a little weird, there's been 20 people.
Yeah. No, I guess
Like,
so. This is the thing is
Well, not 20, because only a very small number of people know that.
right.
That it
Just
was a
just
murder.
the
Okay.
captains, but
3 soldiers who were
the
sitting
captains, the
outside.
3 soldiers, all fest, all door.
That's
Like,
it. Yeah.
okay. But I mean, it's more than 10.
no, I agree. So I think, I guess what I was doing was I was trying to picture it because of course, like we're going to need to picture it. Like we actually are going to, so we're going to have to make decisions, Nick, exactly like you're describing, like exactly how is the tent secured? Like again, it's one of those things like in a book, you can just say he squeezed out the back of the tent, right?
Right.
But on screen, if we're going to show him doing it, then we have to decide how, in fact, is the tent secured? How exactly does he get out?
Well, I was imagining it was
A
more
burrowing, yeah,
burrowing under
Well,
rather than
if he is burrowing, then there is digging involved, which it would be kind of suspicious. Because the thing is that like, if
well, not
the,
if
if the,
you can kind of like it doesn't require digging.
Yeah.
then the tent isn't
A good
you can't
tent.
keep. Yeah, that's a terrible tent. If you can do
Yes.
that, you don't want to sleep in that tent because it's letting drafts in.
Yes.
But
Yes.
what you can do is I've
Well,
slept in these tents. They're super tight. You can't slip under them.
That's why
but-
that was my problem too. I was trying to picture it. I was trying to picture it.
But what you can do is you can if there's 4 laces holding
So there's
holding
ties
the
with
walls
gaps.
together,
Right, yeah.
right, and you untie one of them enough to slip through.
And you
That can easily go unnoticed. It's not going to flap in the wind very much at all.
Right.
And like somebody taking the tent down will be like, "Oh,
That
did I
one's
already
already
get that one?
untied. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that's weird."
Yeah.
Especially if they're not thinking, I wonder who murdered the general.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
When they know who murdered.
They know who murdered the general. Yeah. This is not a question. Yeah. And
That'll work.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, the untying the tie, but at the same time, I was like, I can't imagine Uldor in the state that he was described as being in, taking
Retying it.
right, retying it exactly.
No,
Going,
no,
let me
that-
untie it
that
and
I can-
retie it and
yeah.
you know cover my tracks. Like
Yeah.
he was covering his tracks badly. You know, with
Oh, well, he was trying to like he threw his bloody shirt under a pallet.
exactly right. Yeah. Exactly. And then finally, he still has his father's blood like on his pants, but it's okay because they're just about to like kneel over his father's body and like everyone's gonna have his father's blood on him, so it'll be fine. Anyway, yeah, no, it was so that's. It works for me so long as I could. It was just like one little tiny twinge that I had of like I couldn't picture it, and I was trying to figure out.
You know, like I hear you. Like there are definitely things, and even when I'm watching a movie or a show, something little like that, but
yeah,
why on earth wouldn't they figure that? I mean, the important thing to remember is Sherlock Holmes is not in the room.
Exactly. No, there's, and as you say, you know, Murray, they're not roping it off, and you know,
like there's no
doing an
idea of contaminating the scene.
There's no serious investigation.
Yeah.
There's enough to establish there's like significant evidence that Caranthir did it.
Yeah.
John Mulaney did before he fell on rough times. Did a bit on like what people used to do to investigate murders before like there were fingerprints and DNA evidence and stuff. Like you like they'd walk in and be like, oh, it looks like the fella died right here, see? And yep, that's it. Well, let's go have lunch.
Well, yeah. Murder will out, as Chaucer will tell you. But that often means things like corpses spontaneously beginning to bleed in the presence of their murderers and things like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
so weird, right?
Yeah, there are lots, but it's the lack of ability to find evidence to be able to. Yeah, exactly.
We'll draw a line around the body. That way we'll know where it was.
I thought for a little while about what was going to happen to Ulfang's body and decided not to deal with that too much.
Right.
At the end, in the script. So, but these are people who put their dead in barrows.
Right.
Like that's what they do.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Which there hasn't been time to dig, so presumably that's still on standby.
Well, that's part of Brodda's motivation for going back as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Good. Well, I was going to say one other thing that there was one other touch that I particularly appreciate, a psychological touch that I really appreciated. And that was the conversation between Uldor and Ulfast after, like right before they find the body, right? When Uldor says that he heard Caranthir and his father fighting, right? And that moment when, because Ulfast's immediate reaction is like, oh man, like I can't wait to see what dad did to that guy, right? Like he is 100% confident that if there was an altercation between Caranthir and Ulfang, that Ulfang was going to mop the floor with this elf guy.
And
right?
in reality,
yeah, I know.
Let's be real.
Exactly. But
like that fight lasts all of a quarter of a second.
You can see Ulfang wasn't going to get into a fight with him.
No, exactly. Ulfang's wise enough to see that.
Pull the dagger on Ulfang.
Yeah. But that's what I thought was so cool about it, was that what was so cool is that was Ulfast's reaction. Right. His reaction was like, oh, my dad would totally beat him up. Right. That'll be. And the thing that I particularly loved about, not only because that felt very real to me, that like.
There's a little, my dad would beat up your
dad.
Yes,
who not only has like a lot of hero worship of his father going on, but like the hero worship of your father combined with like sharing the sentiment of the soldiers in the army and the reverence for their general, who also happens to be your really cool dad. Like from Ulfast, we can see that, whereas Uldor has too many other issues, right? But at the same time, Uldor watched the confrontation between Caranthir and Ulfang. And Ulfang wimped out peacefully.
Yeah.
Right? He didn't like that.
It was the adult in the room as well.
It was
so interesting because I could see my younger self like looking at that and being like, what a weenie. But my now self is like, oh yeah.
Exactly.
Like that's how you get out of getting into a fight in a bar.
Right.
Like,
And
Oh man, that's terrible.
and Ulfast giving voice to it, right? Ulfast like actually saying that really kind of crystallized that for me. Like, even though Uldor obviously had serious issues with Ulfang, nevertheless, that reaction would still be there. Like, there would still be for Uldor, I think, even some kind of a sense of not even just of disappointment, but almost of like betrayal. Like you like you're Ulfang, and yes, you're a jerk, and yes, I'm really frustrated at you and everything, but you're supposed.
That's what he said. He says he acted like he was your overlord. Like,
yes,
what were you doing?
And you just stood there and took it, right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that not only would that somewhat like innocently feel like a betrayal to the Ulfast-esque boy in Uldor, right? Seeing his father in that position, but of course it also dovetails in perfectly with his thinking about the land and everything, right? Like when Caranthir comes and says, I'm not giving you any land, are you going to stand up to him? No, you are not, clearly, right? So, I mean, just all of those, it was a really complex psychological moment for Uldor. In that moment right before he ends up stabbing him. And the way that Ulfast's reaction there, his sort of his totally innocent reaction to hearing the anecdote, the way that shed further light, like back onto that. I really loved how that kind of played together. It really just deepened tremendously my imagination, like my picture of what was happening in Uldor's head at that moment. It was really fun. I've said many times that I try not to do too much psychoanalyzing of authors when reading their books, but psychoanalyzing characters is fun. That's perfectly okay. And anyway, and as I say, I felt like we got an appealingly large amount of material to work with there with Uldor in that moment. It was really satisfying. So impressed in so many ways with how that was handled. There's so many easy paths that this episode avoids without unnecessary overcomplication, because of course there's a reason why the easy paths are easy, right? I mean, there's a like that when you need to get character number one from point A to point B, like there's often a straight line and may feel like not too much time or whatever to do something else, right? So, and again, there's a reason we get these kind of cliche, like the kind of cliches or simplifications that I was talking about before, about like Sauron making a classic like temptation in the wilderness speech, to Ulfang or to Uldor, which like would have been totally an easy way to handle that situation, or to have Uldor come to the people, like Sauron making promises like, but my master Morgoth can give you so much more than the elves, and he will A, deliver on his promises, and B, win. And then Uldor coming and saying to the people, let us, again, like that would have been easy to do. And in fact, there is a perspective from which the text even suggests that's the route to take.
This is going to be part of the kind of, I guess, the irony going into next season about the Easterlings.
Yes.
They weren't really doing it for Morgoth.
Right. Yeah.
Like, and so
what they find is
how we're going to deal with how they end up being shut in Hithlum.
And
it's something we'll have to be thinking through. But this is where I was imagining Brodda in this thankless role, and it's not because he saw that he didn't get the lands that he coveted.
Yes,
but like this is and then I mean I think there's interesting politics we can do with Aaron's role and so on with how that's handled.
Yes.
If we don't make Brodder just a moustache twirling colonial bad guy.
But I think
Yeah.
that you have pulled us away from that by making him kind of a little bit more sympathetic.
Yeah.
That was
in this
that's what I
episode.
wanted.
Yeah.
I wanted him to come across as he's caught up in it.
Because I got news for you. Even colonists didn't really do much mustache twirling. They had their own problems that
Yes.
they were not very good at handling.
Yeah.
I mean Lorgan's not
It's
a
easy
nice
for all of us to say, but you know.
you know that I think, but the whole setup of Sudberidan, right from when Galadriel discovers them to here, gives us that backstory for these people that enables a bit more of a nuanced story to be told about what happened after the Near Ninth, and why the remnant people of Dorloman feel so beset upon by them.
Yeah. By the way, and this is I think sort of in part a me thing. I mean, there is a variance in their prominence in the stories that Tolkien wrote, but I always forget about Lorgan. Like, you know, because Lorgan's role is important at the beginning of the Tuor story, but like Brodda looms so much larger in my imagination than Lorgan, right? But it was nevertheless, it's really fun to think about both of them together, and so imagining, they're the survivors, exactly, and picturing what the situation will be when they I don't know, in some ways even the story that Tolkien tells is, in a sense, a sort of an easier story, right? Like Morgoth delivers promises to the Easterlings and then after reneges on those promises and instead just like shuts them away in Hithlum. Now again, like it's an easy story because the elves don't particularly care, right? The fact of the matter is it's thrown out there as like yet another example of like Morgoth's like despicableness, that even to his crooked tools, you know, he acts badly and in bad faith. Reminding me of like Gandalf's rejection of the mouth of Sauron's terms at the Black Gate, right? But anyway, you know, it's I like how this creates this whole situation where after the battle, Morgoth is like, the Easterlings are just going to find themselves in Morgoth's hands.
Yeah.
And even the possibility that Morgoth is going to like heap good things upon them in warm gratitude for their assistance in the battle is gonna seem completely ridiculous right afterwards. And Lorgan and Brodda are going to realize that not that they've been betrayed, but that they're now just completely trapped, you know, that they are.
I think that's what I was feeling, because once Uldor dies, that voice of we want these lands goes. I mean, you know,
and now it's just a question of, can we escape? And the answer is no.
Get home. And they're now going to be pushed to the other side of Beleriand, where there's, you know, and there's armies of Morgoth in the way.
That's right. Yeah. No, their chances of ever going. And again, it fits in so nicely with that, right? I'm not just going to give you. It's not merely that I'm giving you a small quantity of land. It's that I'm shutting you away in this prison on the far side of, you know, of Beleriand.
So it's vindictive, you know. It's just cruel for the sake of it, which is fine. Morgoth, that's what he does.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know.
But yeah, that I love the rich sort of soil that we will be able to grow things out of over the course of the next few seasons with both the Turin story and the Tuor story.
I mean, another implication of that is they're not being set up as lords of this land. Like, I don't think Morgoth cares who's running it.
Right.
Like, it's just those humans, whoever they are, that's where they are.
Right.
So the way that the remnant people of Dorloman and the newcomers have to interact and work out what's going on is going to be, that can be not so straightforward.
Yeah.
It's not simply these people are brought in as overlords.
Yes.
They assume that because of their own cultural biases and so on. And the fact that there is just old men and women and children left,
And no doubt, like, plenty of free floating resentment from the situation they find themselves in.
Yeah, that's right. And that too. So I think, maybe we can do something with that rather than it simply being they've been placed in charge. Because I think Morgoth just shutting all the humans up in that part of Beleriand, it seems like.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's a really
for easy disposal later.
Yeah, right.
And it creates a really interesting story situation where we can, we're not changing the fact that the Easterlings are the enemies, that the Easterlings are going to be the bad guys in the Dorloman story from here on out. And yet we have not simply made them be, well, they're just evil, They're just,
I mean, we can give Aaron a fair amount of agency.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's, I don't mean that they don't do evil things, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not just a simplistic thing where we're like, but the Easterlings are the evil guys and they just do bad things because they're evil, right? And you said Sauron doesn't really care much about them. The elves who wrote the Silmarillion also don't really care about them and are not particularly interested in a nuanced examination of their culture or their situation.
Sure. And I mean, and Turin's certainly going to have a very distinctive perspective on them.
Yes, for sure. Sure.
And like the way that we've portrayed them, they're not exactly like Tolkien style good guys.
No.
In the story that we've been telling either. Like Ulfang is not an Aragorn or like
right.
At best he's like a younger Denethor, like maybe before he became quite so crotchety and cynical. But yeah,
I mean, the whole culture of Sud-Veradun and its, outreach and so on. Well, Gondor did that sort of stuff too.
Yeah. Well, yes. But we're not asked to walk alongside those guys.
We only read about them in chronicles and
right.
lists.
And we're being given to believe that like this is a culture in decline when this is when we're seeing this.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but it's true that
these people are not the good guys.
Right.
It's quite clear.
Right. Well, I mean, and Tolkien has written varying levels of civilizations doing things that are, maybe good or not so good. But it is true that people like Aragorn are very far on the end of, I'm going to do the right thing in this situation no matter what. And we have not portrayed the Soothbeardine guys as that level of honorable.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, they're not orcs either.
Aragorn does occupy, like Fourth Age Aragorn does occupy a lot of land, and like they do a few things. Now, again, to be fair to him, like these were the people who just conducted warfare against them, so making sure they can't ever do that again is kind of an understandable motivation. But he does do it.
Agreed. But we don't have to talk about that or his tax policy. But yeah, anyway, the point is, I think my general point was, we're in a really good place to represent the Easterlings in Dorloman as Tolkien represented them. And yet we've given them a really interesting and nuanced story such that I I'm now fully expecting that Broda is going to be a little bit of a tragic figure, right? You know, I mean, I think I never would have expected to like feel a little bit sad when Turin kills Broda, right? But I kind of think I'm gonna now. Anyway, it's not that not that I love Broda or that I think that we need to make Broda into a hero, but this situation, the situation we've created is that the Easterlings are going to be people who act badly when they are put in a really bad situation. And that happens, you know, like that's a really common reason why people act badly. And it doesn't take anything away from how badly they're acting, right? And how wrong are the things that they do. It doesn't therefore decrease like Turin's role as hero.
There's a reason why Turin gets sent away, and we're going to have to set that up. I mean, it's got to have been like the danger that young Turin is in, such that Morwen sends him to Dorian, has to be real.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So
in that sense, yes. But, Turin kills a lot of people in that story, and most of them are quite questionable.
Yes.
And Broda tends to be presented as one of the less questionable murders that,
or at least,
slayings, and maybe we can tone that down a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm excited. I'm excited for it, and I totally agree about Turin's danger being real. But there again, like, you don't have to be a mustache twirling villain to decide that the young heir of the previous king might be better for everybody if something happens to him. Like there have been a lot of people who have made that decision over time, right? You don't have to end up bricking them into the walls of the White Tower or anything in order to be making that sort of decision. But anyway, okay. Cool. Well, it's good. I'm so looking forward to Lorgan and Broda now. But in the meantime, episode 13 will present us, will leave us.
Can I just ask you about one more thing?
Oh, sure.
There's one scene which I know Marie liked that we haven't talked about, which is the fireside chat of the Feanorians.
Okay. Yes. So I found that scene, and I mean this purely as a compliment. I found that scene unremarkable in that I felt that like the characters of the Feanorians have been really well established and it like totally fit, Amros is like moping and being weird, and Magor is being kind and friendly to everybody, and Maedhros is like showing like generosity and leadership to his brothers. Caranthir is coming in and being a jerk.
They're doing the thing.
They're doing the thing. Like, I mean, I liked that scene, but again, it didn't jump out at me because I felt like I was in the familiar place. Like I felt like I was in a familiar place with familiar characters, acting in ways that I expected them to act. And again, I know that doesn't sound like a compliment, but it fit. Like it worked in ways that it didn't even like strike me.
I was wondering
go ahead
about that because when I was writing it, it starts with the observation of the Valakirka.
Right. Yes.
So for me, it was light and high beauty that the shadow cannot reach.
Right.
But the Feanorians are looking at it, not Sam.
They have a different relationship with it. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was what I was trying to go for there.
The way that they immediately turned that into, well, what I really appreciated about that was the very different perspective that they had. Like, here's what I mean by different perspective. There is some, sorry, and I apologize. I have my occasional guest was just delivered to me a little while ago. So if you hear any snoring or snorting sounds, it's my little guest of honor over here. She'll make a cameo appearance on camera here in a minute, but but she's fine now, so I'm not going to disturb her. But there you go. You've got to see, that one is watching carefully, really keeping an eye on things. Yeah. Anyway, what I was saying, Alana, was one of the things that you see in The Lord of the Rings is that the gap between the Valar and Iluvatar in the imaginations of non-elves, especially in Middle-earth, is not huge, right? Like, did the Valar do it? Did Iluvatar do it? Like, there's a fine line between those things, and it's pretty blurry, from the perspective of most of the narrative of the world. Again, it's only when the elves start talking or singing their songs that you get any kind of clear glimpse of a different way of thinking about the Valar. The Snow White song that Gildor and his people sing is one of the first glimpses that we get into that, that they just have a different relationship with the Valar than, and therefore think about the stars differently, right? Than, like a hobbit would think. But this, of course, is one of the big, big differences in perspective between the Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, right? In the Silmarillion, you're eye to eye with the elves looking up at the Valar, but the Valar aren't that high above. I mean, they're high, but you know what I mean? They're one step up, right?
Especially if you're a son of Feanor.
Right, especially.
For the Calaquendi, they've met the Valar. They've had conversations with them.
Yeah, they live there. I mean, they're not ordinary people, but
so they had a familiarity.
Yes.
Doesn't put them on the same level as, doesn't mean they understood the Valar.
Right.
But they had a familiarity.
And we as readers share that to some extent, because we too are familiar with the Valar and what they're doing, in their much more personable kind of characters, in the Silmarillion. Again, very different from take for instance the sense that, Manwë probably involved in the wind from the sea right before the Battle of Pelennor Field, right? That wafts the ships up the river and brings the change of the wind that, Weedfada smells and everything, right? Like probably Manwë, that was a Manwë thing, right? That there is an intervention by the Valar, and that the breeze itself is not only the intervention, but also an indication that, someone's looking out for them, right? But think how miles different that is from Fingon and, on the slopes of Thangorodrim
Manwë to whom all birds are dear.
Exactly, right? He's met him, right? And it's a prayer in that moment, but again, it's totally different. So that's the Silmarillion, right? That's a Silmarillion perspective. Whereas the Lord of the Rings is told from the Hobbit point of view. So we're looking way up at we're looking up at the humans. We're looking way up at the elves. And the Valar and the Iluvatar are somewhere both in the background, so far above both of the other two that you certainly can't tell the difference, between them. It's like trying to tell the difference between the distance of the stars and the distance of the black sky behind them, right? I mean, it's all up there, right? So anyway, Ilana, this is a very indirect way of getting around to saying, I really like how you captured that in that moment, where it's set up in ways, even the seeing of the Valakirka is reminiscent
through the rack of the
rack, is reminiscent of two different moments in the Lord of the Rings. Sam seeing the star, right, first, and the sickle of the Valar appearing above Bree Hill, before the Nazgul, when the Nazgul are closing in. So like there's a couple different star moments, right, which are like, Sam certainly is inspired to think of higher things, right, by the one. But in any case, both of those moments, right, inspire at most the kind of general Estelle, right, that Sam experiences. Whereas when the Feanorians look out and see the Valakirka, it just leads them to talk politics, basically, right? Like they're just like, the Valar are looking down, but like we know they don't care. So like, are they looking? Yes, but like they're not going to do it. Anyway, I thought that it was a really fun reminder of that difference in level, because within SilmFilm, it's been a long time. Like the Valar are increasingly distant from our narrative, have been for a long time.
So
that was
why I really wanted to have, before they join the battle, some kind of intervention, because for me, what that's a sign of is you cannot win. Without.
Without us.
Which is true, right? And they don't get that memo at all. That's what the sickle of the Valar represents, really.
Right, their judgment on Morgoth, and
so you can do what you like, elves, and it'll be a great story, but you're not going to win without us. And that they don't get that.
But the other thing that I thought was really interesting in that conversation was their reflections on Feanor's words, right? I thought was on the one hand, the sons of Feanor at this stage, especially Maedhros, are not just like blindly hero worshipping dad and adhering to all of his teachings, right? Like that's not what the Feanorians are. And yet they're also not, Amros is a weirdo because he's the one who is like out of beat with everybody else. Like, as you say, Marie, they don't repudiate it either. And so hearing them in that moment be like, well, but remember what dad said, right? And the way that we can see them in that moment kind of embracing, it's like the difference between the Feanorians and the rest of the elves is that the rest of the elves, both of them agree, both the Feanorians and the rest of the elves agree that Feanor was kind of crazy and that what he did was destructive. And the Feanorians know that they're caught up in that destructiveness, though they have different relationships to it, as we've depicted them. But the rest of the elves basically are like ready to throw out almost every... I mean, they still write in Tengwar and stuff, like they still appreciate, they still celebrate the things that Feanor was able to accomplish, the stuff that he made. And like they don't hate the Silmarils, for instance. But yet they're a little bit more wholesale in distancing themselves from Feanor and everything that he said and taught, right? Whereas the Feanorians are much more willing to be like, Dad caused a lot of problems and put us in a pretty difficult situation, but he was not all wrong. Right. Like, right. Yeah. He was not all wrong. It's not exactly that they paint him as the good guy, right? Or believe him to be misunderstood by everybody. But you do get the impression that they're like, Dad had his faults and deserves the bad press that he gets, but he also was right about a lot of things, right? Like should we be fighting Morgoth and trying to recover the Silmarils? Yes, we absolutely should be doing that, right? And the way, should we be doing, deeds of valor and renown? Will that make this worth it? Not only do they still cling to that, but I love the way in which it's Maedhros who talks about that, isn't it? In the scene?
Yeah.
For Maedhros has to be positively clinging to that statement, right? Because it's the only thing, speaking of being trapped, right? It's the only thing that is going to keep life being worthwhile, like when you're bound to the oath of Feanor, right? And you know that it's going to cause trouble, and he's already now in the, I am actively attempting to prevent my brothers from starting a second civil war, right? Second kinslaying is on the agenda with Doriath, and I'm actively engaged in machinations to prevent it. So the weight, the moral weight of the oath of Feanor has to weigh very heavily on Maedhros right now. And yet that one thing, that's got to be that statement of Feanor about them doing, that evil shall be good to have been because of the deeds that they will do. That has to be almost like Feanorian Estelle to Maedhros, right? So anyway, yeah, I liked, I was particularly appreciative of that note in Maedhros's reaction. But as I say, I really liked the what. Do you understand what I mean when I said it led them to talk politics, right? It's very practical, their discussion of that. There's nothing of the
all in wonder.
Yeah, the all in one, the way in which, you think about whenever Frodo or Sam refer to Elbereth in the post Gildor parts of the book, it's there's no element of that, right, in the Feanorians conversation.
And even other Calaquendi are way more respectful towards the Valar and deferential and all of that.
Yes.
It's specifically Feanorian to be well, who cares what the Valar said?
Right. Especially since they've got good reason to dislike what the Valar said, right?
They have to be able to dismiss it.
Yeah.
And be well, that's them, but we're doing our own thing, and it doesn't matter.
Right.
And no other elves take that viewpoint.
Yeah.
Anywhere near to the extreme that they do.
Yeah.
I was mightily relieved, Marie, that you liked the scene because of the weight of expectations.
There's always
others might have a weight of expectations writing Morwen scene.
Right. Exactly. There's higher stakes. Yeah. Writing a Feanorian scene. Absolutely.
Look, I mean, you did a great job. It's all well.
Yeah. All right.
It shows how well the SilmFilm has characterized each individual Feanorian that, as a new script writer writing lines for these characters, is actually very clear.
Yeah.
Well,
that's why I brought that up first. That was my first reaction to the scene is that,
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the work of years of SilmFilm, right?
Yes.
True.
Yes, exactly. No, it is. And I mean, and it's a classic problem, right? Of 7 brothers, and how do you establish their characters all?
You dress them up in all different
colors. Give them different color hoods. That's what you need.
Button-up shirts. You have them marry different women.
Yes. Yeah,
they all have a particular dance style.
That's right.
Seven brides for 7 brothers. Is that what this is?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not the first time that's come up in this context.
No, it's not. It's not.
Nope.
Okay. So next time we're going to have our scenes littered with more corpses than the final act of a Shakespearean tragedy. Everybody dies. Not everybody, but lots of
lot.
people will die in the
Not many
next
people,
episode.
yes.
I promise that lots of people will die.
Yeah. So we will be bracing ourselves for the final flood of tears in the Near Ninth Arnodiad in episode 13. Our next session is going to be Thursday, May 8th, when we will discuss this, so people still have some time to brace themselves for that. And also, we did want to say that to invite people, if anyone is working on or interested in doing artwork for props, sets, or costumes for season 7. It's really fun when people have a chance to do some, like whether you want to do some concept art, you want to suggest locations is something that we've done before. You want to do some costuming discussion, or if there's any sort of particular, anyway, any kind of visual element that you would like to work on. We encourage people to contribute things. If we get enough contributions from that, then we'll do an episode on that. If not, not big deal. We can't. Not trying to lean on anybody, but wanted to make sure to extend the invitation. We would love to see what folks are thinking about season 7 at this stage, or what they have been thinking about as we've been going through. So you can go to, again, forums.signumuniversity.org, go to the SilmFilm section, and you'll see the places to deposit some of those things so that we can have it to review. All right. And I'm sure episode 13 is going to be great, Nick.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited for episode 13. All right. So that's May 8th is 2 weeks, right?
No, we're skipping the entire month of April.
Yeah, I was gonna
May
say,
8th. May 8th. Right. Not April 8th. We're skipping the entire month of April due to various conflicts. So Nick has plenty of time to work on this episode. So yes, May 8th. Sorry, that's so far in the future. I didn't even, I read right over it.
It doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I'm like, May, I
That's
haven't even thought about May yet.
Fair enough.
Okay. Yeah. No. Wow. Yeah. I remember now that this had happened, that we had this discussion. But yeah, when I was reading that, I think I said May 8th, but I was absolutely thinking April in my head.
Not April.
But not April. May. So, okay. So we have.
Gives Phil more time to compose too.
It gives Phil more time to compose. So the hope is between in the month of May and the beginning of June, we may be able to come to the end, or almost to the end. We'll be doing our final episode is generally the music episode with Phil, final episode of the season, and that should be the right after Mythmoot. And I think we can. Who knows, Nick? Maybe we do episode 13 at Mythmoot, right? And have corpses littering the front of the room. Again,
It's not going to be enough dialogue for it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah,
It would be a very challenging thing to stage.
It would be challenging. I was a little
Ranger
bit joking
mood.
about that. Oh yeah, Ranger mood. We'll do it. Yeah, there we go. That'll be much clearer. All right, awesome. Well, so we'll have not a full hiatus, but we're going to have a little bit of a break caused by various conflicts of schedule, and also the taking it as a sign that we should give Nick and Phil more time to do their work for those final two things. But we will look forward. We're coming towards the end of season 7. I found myself, kind of thinking about and looking forward to season 8 stuff as we move forward.
You can see I am.
the end of season 7, I feel like it's funny because of course it's the end of season 7 is the biggest downer we've had at the end of any season by far, I think.
Sure.
But it also feels like a lot of momentum pushing through into the stories, or maybe it's just because I've been looking forward to Turin and Tuor for so long that it's because those are really fascinating stories.
We got one of the great tales in, so
we have we've checked off one of the great tales, and
Yes.
now we have.
Yes, we've had one, yes, but what about another great tale?
What about 2 more at the same time? Can we do that?
It's so funny because like you hear people talk, well, maybe instead of making a film of the Silmarillion, they should make like an anthology where they just tell the great tales, and I'm just like, you're missing all of the connective tissue that makes all those stories so fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, could you do it?
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. You could. I don't think you could make a single Silmarillion film.
No.
I don't think you could do that
I think
have anything.
It's really
close
hard to imagine a feature film just called The Silmarillion.
Yeah, no. It's
That
not a thing that could be.
You would
tries
have
to do it.
make a lot of choices that would be extremely destructive.
Well, it's
mean,
hard. It's hard to see how you could even make a coherent story out of it.
I don't.
I mean, you can do a kind of prologue-y thing like they did in Rings of Power to set up whatever great tale you can tell, like where
But even
we
it
are.
would have to be like I could see you doing. But what do you do? Is the movie the elf story, and you prologue the Valar thing? Anyway,
Or the only thing that I can think of is if you just make it about the Silmarils, and you cut out Beren and Luthien entirely, and you
Well, I mean, that's kind of about the Silmarils.
right,
No,
right. But if you just made it about like Feanor makes the Silmarils, Melkor steals the Silmarils, and then
Then
it's
they
all
fight
about the
about the
quest, and they right, and
Then they
and-
fight about the
But if
Silmarils, and then
that's the
War of Wrath.
like the cause of war, like that's why I was talking about the Rings of Power. That sort of presents the entire sort of Valinor part of the story as a prologue to why the elves are warring with Morgoth. And if you include the Silmarils in that, then you've got that.
Yeah,
and
you could
then
you could just start with unnumbered tears. Just start here.
right,
Yeah, start with that.
Maybe we
Start
don't
with the
try to
double
solve the
Valar.
unsolvable problem tonight.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think you could drop into to Beren and Luthien or Turin or the Fall of Gondolin for that matter, without needing the entire story.
this would be a fantastic regional moot topic, right? Like,
Yeah.
for legal
don't know.
reasons, studio executives have decreed the Silmarillion can be produced, but it can only be done in this way. How can you do a single feature film on the Silmarillion and make it as good as that could possibly be? How would you approach that?
I don't think I can attend that regional moot story. I think I have
A thing.
I have a thing that I need to do that is
She's going to be
scheduled at a time.
reorganizing her sock drawer. That
I will be doing
that weekend.
something else at that time. That sounds terrible.
Yeah. Anyway,
you could do a thing.
Of
I
course
would.
you could, but we've been spending 10 years doing this thing.
exactly.
I don't want to start from scratch doing something worse.
Yeah, agreed. Anyway, I forget how we got here, but anyway, oh yeah, anticipating season 8. That was how we got
Yes,
here.
that I'm fine with.
Right. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna actually sign off because it's getting really late now. Thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you guys in a little over a month, like 5-ish weeks or something like that. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.